and this will be... So hello everybody and welcome to this session. As I said to you all earlier, this is the first time I've done a Collaborate session, so as the main presenter. So if I have technological issues, forgive me, but with Scott helping me, I'm sure I'll do very well. So we'll look and see what we're going to cover today. First thing is, what is a bibliography? Your task, you've been asked in assignment 2 to write an annotated bibliography, and there's quite a lot of discussion about what this actually constitutes, and of course it's completely different for different purposes. So let's start with the broad purpose. Scott and I have both been research students in the past, and we've had to create bibliographies or annotated bibliographies as part of our literature reviews for postgraduate work. So this is a list of references that or sources that we're going to be used for research, and we present it in an alphabetical order, and it's to show what we've researched totally. But when we come to our actual writing of our thesis, we may not use all of those. So the things that we actually use are our reference list. Only the things that we're going to use in our essay or our publication or our thesis is in the reference list. The bibliography is the big picture stuff, the stuff that you'll actually have read before you come down to do the thing. So some of you have probably done background reading already in preparation for your Learning Reflections 3, or because you're all conscientious and joining the session, you're probably quite well ahead on your CUC 100 tasks. So you've probably done some reading, some researching, thinking about the topic. But you might find that a lot of what you read reflects on citizenship, but it's not really relevant to the essential components that you're choosing. So you won't actually use those in your reference list. But if you were making a bibliography, you would put them in because they've informed your reasoning, they've informed what you're thinking about. So that's what a bibliography is, everything that you've used in your research. So for the annotated bibliography, which is what we're asking you to do, it summarizes each reference and it gives an explanation of, if you're doing it for thesis purposes or for postgraduate or probably by 3rd or 4th year you'll be using these, it gives you a note for each reference so that you can keep track of what you're doing. So you might say, well, you're not a 3rd year student or a postgraduate student, so why are we doing it? Well, for our unit, which is trying to upskill you in an academic literacy, hi Madeline, welcome. It's probably the best reason for getting you to do it is, in the old days, people used to do comprehension tests. They used to try and see how you test students' understanding of reading they've done. Well, a much more effective way is to see if you can summarize key ideas, if you've understood the reading enough to summarize the key ideas in it. And of course, as you know, you've had quite a lot of help on that because we've sent you out notes each week and we've scaffolded you through it. But also, when you have to comment and transfer those key ideas that you've met into another context, that shows total understanding. We can check that you really did understand what you were reading. So that's the purpose of our using the annotated bibliography. So, as we've said, they're a common form of assessment, especially at later stages in the university. So you may not be asked to do another one in your 1st year. Perhaps you will. You might have to do a literature review for one of your units. It completely depends on the discipline you're in, and there's different types of assignments depending on whether you're in nursing or engineering or environment or teaching. It's really very, very diverse in terms of forms of assessment. But so we're using this one as a form of assessment here. because, as I said, shows us that you've understood what you've been reading and you're able to, hello? Nope, something we've been, Danielle. Sorry, I'm getting used to this now. It's helping you put down the key ideas, and so that shows us we know it, and then you're starting to link it to your own essay and your own arguments. So it's getting your thought processes going towards your final assignment, because a lot of the what you're beginning to think about the readings in relation to your final assignment will actually start you formulating your arguments, and you may be able to read your use your annotations, or certainly adaptations of them, in your actual arguments in your final assignment. Now, I'm going quite quickly.
There's a question.
Any questions?
Yes, there's a question here from Danielle. Says, are we allowed to use quotes?
Certainly in your essay, your final essay, but in an annotated bibliography, it has to be 100% in your own words. And of course, being able to paraphrase, you summarize the key points and then paraphrase them into your own words. And that paraphrasing is one of the most important parts. So don't quote, but of course, you can use what we call commonly accepted words. So words like social responsibility, economic progress, climate change, stimulation of the economy, those sorts of common terms we wouldn't expect you to try and paraphrase, but you need to not quote, because you've got such a short number of words. You've only got a very, very limited amount of time to show us that you can summarize and paraphrase. So don't quote in an annotated bibliography, but certainly you can quote in your final assignment. Does that answer your question, Danielle? Yeah, okay, Scott's also typed that, that's great. Any other questions about anything so far? Okay, we'll move on to the next thing. Now this slide shows the sort of things that a postgraduate, third year, fourth year postgraduate student might write down for themselves. So somebody's probably doing something on English literature, and they're looking at a range of different literary pieces. And so they've looked at Ladinson. For their own purposes, I've set out what Ladinson wants to say, and they've given the bibliographical details. Notice they've numbered the reference. That's for their personal reference, and I really hesitated with this slide because we do not number them. You put them in alphabetical order according to the author's surname, not according to the reading number, and we don't number. So in a way, I think I'll skip over this one and move on, because this could be confusing for you seeing that number there. So this is more like it when we look at the next slide, which starts with Kennedy, and this is from, you've got this in your UI if you want to look further at it, or you probably already have. And so you start with bibliographical details at the top, then that's quite a good way to begin. In this article, Kennedy, Hahn, and Lee, and sometimes, some people like a bracket there with the date, but it's actually not necessary because we've got the date up at the top anyway. So this is good. They say what the main things that they do, where they're looking at. They begin by examining the literature. They then compare. They briefly explain. So they're keeping on referring back to the author throughout. So we've got no doubt that the person here is summarizing what the author said. So make sure the authors are prominent in that first summary. Then when you move to the comment, that's when your voice comes in. But we'll move on to that part soon, because there's a couple of very important things that you need to do there. So another thing that's happened in the past that I thought I probably should mention to you. Notice how we've got here Kennedy, Hahn, and Lee. We don't suddenly say, oh, it's got to be in alphabetical order, therefore I better change it within the bibliographical detail as well. So we don't put the H before the K and say, I'm going to change it and put Hahn, Kennedy, and Lee, because that makes alphabetical order within the bibliographical details. When we say alphabetical order, we're only meaning with the author, the given order of the author's name. So Kennedy, you can never ever change Kennedy, Hahn, and Lee. Why do you think that might be? Go on, sorry, Scott.
Oh, sorry. There's a question here about should it be indented, like for APA.
I think.
The
what's your thought on that?
In the examples, it is indented, but the way that you're presented is acceptable to me.
Same with me. I agree. In the example we got given from the library with their new, I think it's 6th edition APA, they've indented it, but I'm equally happy to have it non-indented just like this. So you won't get any marks off either way, indented or not indented. So we won't give you marks for that. The reason that authors, the reason you can't change the order of the authors in a given article is they have decided on it. They might have decided on it a number of ways. And one thing you have to realize is academia and the world of publication is very competitive. And this is the only way that academics publishing is the only way that they can build up their credit. So it's sort of like money in the bank. You've got to publish to get promotion. And
there's an expression, if I don't mind sharing it with everybody. It's called, for academics, it's called publish or perish.
And it's so true. You will definitely not get promotion if you don't publish. And sometimes that's got a downside because it means people publish things that probably aren't that worthy of, or do we really need to know it? But of course they have to get these publications out. And another unfortunate thing is big universities, sometimes they're so, lecturers are so intent on their publications, they neglect their teaching strategies. And that's an ongoing debate within universities whether publications or teaching strategies should get equal merit. Anyway, I'm getting off track a little bit here. So we're back onto the author the authors decide what their level of status is. And if you get a big long one like we do with the Yun one, that core reading 3, in the end we just put Yun et al. Probably because there's more than 3 authors. And of course then you never ever think about those other authors and Yun gets all the credit. So there must be a reason for that. He must have been the key researcher, or maybe he's the person who has the most knowledge about it, or maybe he's got the most status and they put his name first, they know they'll get a higher ranking publication. Who knows? But we cannot change that order. So now we're moving on to, we've really covered this, that there's 2 types of annotated bibliographies that you are likely to encounter, and they're the sort that just summarize, which is usually for your own research, or our sort that we're summarizing and commenting. So we're concerned with number 2 here, as we've discussed now. So let's look at assignment 2, and the details are on your page 17 to 18 of your UI. So the bibliographical details form a heading for each reading. So you don't need to put annotated bibliography, or you don't need to put assignment 2, or you don't need to put anything. When they say a heading, it's a little bit misleading because there isn't a heading, there's just the bibliographic details there. So you start with that. Hello, Gerald's just joined as well. And they're in alphabetical order without a number. So no numbering system. And the alphabetical order is keep saying that is because if we didn't reinforce that, you'd probably put core reading 1 first, core reading 2 second, and core reading 3 third. Whereas core reading 1 is Ray Lake and Syvertson, core reading 2 is Dwyer, core reading 3 is Unit L. And so if we were going to stick to probably what you think would be logical, then you'd put Ray Lake first. Whereas in fact, what would the order be? Who would be the first person you should be putting down? Somebody want to write an answer? Okay, so the first person that you'll be putting down for your first bibliographical details will be Dwyer, because D comes before the first author of the others. Great. So Crystal's joined. Hi, Crystal. So is everyone clear on that? Yun will be last. Yes, Natasha, Yun will be last because Y comes in the last out of the Dwyer, Ray Lake, and Yun. Yun's the last in the alphabet. So everyone's clear on that. Good. So now for your first 2 paragraphs, probably 150 to 200 words. You've got 300 words. Scott, would you agree with me that generally we allow about 10% over maximum?
Yes, I always have the gauge of 10% over maximum. Yep. Yeah.
Look, if I'm reading it and thinking this looks good, sounds good, seems to have captured the key ideas, and it's cohesive, I don't actually go and look at the word count and think, oh my goodness, they went to 361, and say, wow, that was 11 over our maximum extra word. I think you've got a little bit of leeway, but I hesitate to say this because if you're doing law, for example, they can be very, very precise on their word numbers, and you can start getting marks off them. Or I know that I've got 2 of my kids have done law degrees, and I know at one university they drew a line almost through a word where the word limit ended, and they refused to assess the rest of what was written. So when I say to you we can be a little bit flexible on word limit within CEC 100, that's sort of not going to happen in all things. So just be wary that you should really try to stick to the word limit. But if you think the flow of what you're writing just needs a little bit more to make it more coherent, then certainly we allow it. But as Scott said,
I always say to students that it's better to be over with your word count and then to edit back and to make your writing more concise, as opposed to being under the word count and then being tempted to pad out your work, your paragraph, or if it's an essay.
And that's so important, especially when it comes to your final essay, because padding, when people are just trying to make up the word limit with padding, it stands out like a sore thumb to us as assessors, and it's sort of irritating. So it's better to read something that flows really well. It's got heaps of ideas and depth of argument, and it's a little bit over the word thing. And then that shows extra research, extra depth of argument, going really 100% of the way to present something very substantial. So for this one, for the annotated bibliography, if you think about it being about 150 to 200 for your summary, your summary will probably be longer than your comment, because it's fairly hard to summarize as less than 150 to 200 words for each of the readings. In fact, it's quite a difficult task. And even with our reading notes and our scaffolding through, you'll still find it quite difficult to bring it right down to that limit. But just remember, they're the key ideas that you pick up, and then you're relating those key ideas to your ideas about your the essential citizenship components in your workplace, and they'll be different for everyone. So we're not looking for a set comment. There's no right or wrong. it'll be what you're feeling about your essay and your particular workplace and which skills you think are important at that in your particular situation. So there is a bit of a right and wrong for the summary because we know exactly what the key ideas are. But when it comes to your second part, where you're commenting on the relevance of the reading for your final essay and how you might use them, then that's much, much more flexible, and of course it's completely subjective at this stage to yours. But for goodness sake, when it says, are these arguments relevant for the final essay, don't just put in the second part, no, these aren't, I can't use these in my final essay, or these are, you won't use I. These arguments are not at all relevant to my final essay, full stop, because that doesn't tell us anything. If they're not relevant, you might want to say why, which might be that you think that your own particular career profession has other things that are more important. So you always have to qualify it, and this applies to everything that you write at university. You can never just leave a blanket statement. You must always qualify it with why. It's the why part that shows you're a critical thinker. So just thinking back on past students, Scott, would you agree that the comment seems to be harder for them than the summary?
Did you hear me? Yes, yeah, I agree with you.
So, you agree? Yeah. That you'll probably find the summary, okay, you've had the taxonomy, you've had the reading notes, yes, you can probably paraphrase that quite well, but it'll be thinking about, at this stage you haven't done very much research for your final essay, and you'll be thinking, what do I do here? But just remember, as I said, this is your opinion at this stage. You're commenting on how you think it might be relevant. And so you can be honest, and there's no right or wrong answer. So you can write what you're actually feeling. But when I've said it's opinion, it's what you're feeling, just remember that we'll come on to these. For the criteria, you can't use I. Now, we've done 3 learning reflections so far, and they've all allowed you to say, I think, I did this, etc. Or some of you have written in the, when you were a nurse, you are such and such. Now this is the first time that you have to suddenly switch, and from now on, for assignments 2, 3, and 4, you're now into using third person only. So we'll come on to how you can do that more easily a little bit later in the session. But just remember that when it says comment on the relevance for your final essay, we're not asking you to comment using I. We're using you to comment more globally. And we'll, as I said, we'll come on to that. So any more questions so far about that? Okay, Tiz's joined the session. Hello. The bits you've missed out on so far, you'll quickly catch up on, and you can listen to the recording afterwards if you want to. So we've talked a little about the comment bit. You can use the specific terms or ideas that the author used, and I mentioned that in terms of, obviously you can use communication, you use, just thinking about Dwyer, she talks about multicultural issues, cultural differences, need for cultural understanding, these sorts of terms. You don't have to try and paraphrase them. You can use those specific terms because they're what we call common knowledge terms. It's this is something that's this is something you may or may not know, that when you're, especially it refers to referencing, when you've got something that's common knowledge, you do not have to reference it. So you don't need to ever, if you are writing something about environment and you said that whales are mammals who live in the southern oceans of the Pacific, you wouldn't need to put a reference and say that you found that in a encyclopedia or in whatever, because everybody knows whales are mammals who live in the southern oceans. So when it's something, that's a really quite an obvious example, but when it is something that is common knowledge, everybody knows it, you don't need to reference. But when it comes to something that's trying to build your argument and it could be contested, other people might not agree with it, and you're arguing for it, that's why you need the evidence to back it up. So you're going to have to make the connections with what you've read to your own arguments explicit, and that, as I said before, that's why you have to justify it. You just can't say it will be useful. You have to say it will be useful because the argument will be that communication is an essential component of citizenship in a hospital environment, and Dwyer mentions the need for cultural understanding, for direct, for empathy, for good listening skills, whatever you think the components of communication might be in your workplace. So you're quite explicit about making those connections. Is this clear? Yes, thank you. Okay. And as I said earlier, that you actually are doing some work towards your final essay when you're doing this, because especially if you're choosing teamwork, communication, and social responsibility as the 3 essential components of your workplace citizenship, then you've already got some of your arguments already developed. But of course, having said that, you do not have to choose those 3. They were just the 3 given in the Charles Darwin University graduate attributes. And of course, there are many, many others. And of course, reading the Learning Reflection 3, some of you will come up with amazing ones that sound very, very interesting and relevant. So you may decide that, say, social responsibility isn't relevant to your, it may be relevant in general, but it's not relevant to your essay, because that's not one of the 3 you're going to use. Rather, you think this other one is more relevant, social responsibility. So that's how you can be explicit with these 3 readings, even if you decide that these are not the readings, that these are not the top core elements of citizenship in the workplace that you're going to actually use. So anyone want to ask anything more about the comment bit, or Scott, do you want to add anything?
No, most of the comments that are coming through is that they are actually following what you're saying quite well.
Yeah, yeah, good. Okay, moving on then. Oh, we've really covered this. What's the author's message? What's the author's message about teamwork? For instance, if you're looking at teamwork as one, or we are looking at teamwork as the core reading, how can you link your arguments to about teamwork? Well, I've given you the example already of communication, so we really don't have to worry about that. Same thing, that you may or may not think teamwork is one of the core, of the essential components of citizenship in your workplace. It might be, and there are quite a few workplaces where things can be done, perhaps they're quite competitive. Perhaps a financial institution, people are competing with each other, and teamwork isn't really part of the work ethic at all, even though maybe it should be. So you maybe find that teamwork isn't actually relevant to your work situation, and you can then say why. So the link is linking it to your essay topic and then saying yes or no, it's relevant. Okay, so let's return to the essay task. Now, notice in the essay task, we haven't looked at this specifically in this session, that we have this first part here, and we call the first part Charles Darwin University graduate attributes identify social responsibility, communication, and teamwork as the skills that make up the core employability attribute of citizenship. Now, all that's giving you a statement saying this is what CDU's graduate attributes have identified. So that's not part of the question that you have to answer. That's just a statement giving you some background information. And you can see from that also, it justifies, that's why we chose the core readings to reflect social responsibility, communication, and teamwork, because it was CDU's graduate attributes that identified these. So we thought it was appropriate to carry those through within our unit. But that doesn't mean to say these are the essential elements for your workplace. So that's why we now go and ask you the real question you have to answer. Reflecting on your current or future workplace, what are the essential components of workplace citizenship? Critically argue the importance of at least 3 skills or values. So, first thing you have to do, 2 parts of this really. You've got to reflect on your current or future workplace. Now, some people might say, well, I don't know what my future workplace will be. This is an academic exercise in a way to show that you have acquired the skills that are inherent in academic literacy. Unlike other units which are very content-based, so if you're doing nursing, then you've got very specific science and nursing subjects. Same with sociology, psychology, environmental science, business studies, whatever you're doing, you've got very, very discipline-related topics, education, etc. Our unit is, this is the theme, but really our intent is to help you develop the skills you need for your own discipline area. Therefore, what you present as your workplace doesn't really have to be true. If you really don't know what you're going to do when you finish uni and you're not working at present, you can't say, I can't do this essay because I haven't got a current or future workplace. Just create one, do a little bit of research, put yourself in the thing, what would it be like to be a teacher, a business person, a nurse, an accountant, a psychologist, and go from there. Although I'm sure most of you are probably career driven in your choice to go to uni and do a degree. So you start off saying citizen in the workplace means you define it, in other words, because it's quite a broad term, and you will come up, again, there's really no right or wrong answer to what citizenship in the workplace means. The more you research, the more you'll realize there's organizational citizen behavior, which there's a lot more written about that you'll find that there's an awful lot written on OCB, and a lot of it is very relevant and broad across the broad terms. But you might be doing something in remote education and find that organizational citizenship behavior isn't as relevant as in another definition of citizenship, which might be more community-based. So you can define it within the parameters of what you've researched and found out as the best definition that suits your particular set of circumstances. And the reason we get you to set it out like this probably is that it also lets us know when you're arguing in this essay, this is what you mean by citizenship. Okay, now what you're writing makes sense. Whereas if we didn't know what it means within the context of your essay, then we might view it differently. So it's quite important that you do let us know what citizenship in the workplace means in your context. And then the next thing you would do, you must turn it around and do things like citizenship is an important skill in the workplace because You don't, and this is what I was talking about before when we're moving from first person to third person now. We don't say, I think citizenship is important, because of course you're writing it, therefore we know you think it. And so that's the way you stop using I. So if you're wanting to talk about I as a nurse, you stop and you say no, you'd say nurses in the workplace find that. So you're keeping it impersonal, third person. Okay, Scott's typing away here. Well, is everything, Scott, do you want to add anything that anyone's asked?
No, there's basically there's no questions coming through. I'm just re-emphasizing.
No questions coming through? Yep. Okay. I'm not very multitasking here. I'm talking and I can't read at the same time, so lucky that Scott's there typing. So just keep your focus on, you're talking about, you're reflecting on a workplace that may or may not be your current one, your future one, or a potential one that could happen. And you're thinking about the essential components of workplace citizenship, not all the peripheral ones. There's loads and loads of things that make up citizenship. You're thinking about the essential components, and you're looking at least 3 of those. And already, as we've said, we've given you above an example of 3 of those by giving you that blurb at the beginning, which says social responsibility, communication, and teamwork. Oh, I'm sorry, here there's obviously a big fire or something going outside my window over here. So you can choose communication, professionalism, integrity. Oh, I couldn't brainstorm them all, but you'll know by your reading which ones you want to choose. Just make sure that you don't, I don't know, Scott, but I think that you might agree, if you take more than 3, it says at least 3, this is a case where you really wouldn't need to do any more than 4 at the absolute most, because you've only got 1,500 to 2,000 words, and if you took any more, you couldn't go into the depth that's needed to develop a very good argument. Do you agree with that, Scott?
Yes, that's correct.
I think that in the past, the essays that I've read that have done really well have just chosen 3. And then so they've been able to go into really, 600 words on each argument really based on it. Then they've got an introduction and a conclusion. So they seem to have been the ones that work out best. So when it says at least 3, sometimes when you're conscientious, you say, oh, if they say at least 3, that means they probably want more. I think in this case, we really could perhaps word that a little bit differently. And we didn't limit it to, we didn't just say choose 3. We put at least 3 because some people feel quite fervently that there are 4 that have to be addressed. Well, that's fine, but don't take 5 or 6 or 7, which some people have done in their learning reflection. And I've suggested it to some of my students, and you may well be some of them here today, that sometimes you can take a group like honesty, trustworthiness, etc. They're giving those as separate components of workplace citizenship, whereas in fact they can all be grouped together perhaps under integrity or under social responsibility or something. So if you're finding lots of different ones, think if you can make a broader term for them to reduce the number of skills that you have, and that's another way of developing your argument. Then you can talk about the sub-skills that they're broken down into in your examples. Any questions about anything on that? Okay, so moving on to the next part, formatting. Now, I'm a technological dinosaur, so I don't go into your settings when I'm marking your assignment. I look to see whether you've done APA referencing, and I look at the content, and I look at your comment section very, very closely. But as long as the details are right and it's typed consistently and it doesn't look too far out, then I usually move on and assume that you've done your formatting correctly. But having said that, this is a component of the ICT skills are a component of CUC 100, so that's why we get you to set it up according to a certain format. But I imagine most of you find this very, very easy to do, and I think the reason that I don't notice how things are formatted anymore is that everybody does it correctly. And as somebody said in a recent session, that this is money for jam. In other words, it's free points, you know, because I think maybe we give 10% to, I haven't got the criteria sheet in front of me, I think we give 10% to formatting and cover sheet, etc. And so it would be silly to lose marks on that by not having a margin and not having a header and footer in on the top of your assignment. They are standard for every assignment you'll do. Cover sheet, headers and footers will be, and correct margins will be standard for every assignment you do at university. So it's good to get it right here and now. Any questions on formatting? There's a guide to the formatting in the weekly learning guide. There's also one under assignments, and you've got it here, and it's in your UI. So do you put number on the page number on the first page? Now, the cover sheet has to be integrated. That brings me up to the first thing. The cover sheet has to be integrated into your document, that it doesn't count as page 1. Is that right, Scott?
Apologies, I was just typing something there. What was the question then?
Sorry. Jasmine said, do you put a page number on the first page? You know how we have to integrate the cover sheet into the document so that the cover sheet is actually the first page of your document, but it's not numbered. The first page of your actual assignment is the first page after the cover sheet.
Yeah, generally speaking, yes, that's correct, because it's called a cover sheet. It's actually, it's not a page.
It's not a page, yeah. So even though the cover sheet is actually the first page on your document, the first page of your assignment is the next one down where your assignment actually starts. And you don't need, as I said, you don't need a heading. You've got your cover sheet, and you go straight in. You've got your headers and your footers, and you go straight into Dwyer, and you mention whatever. So that's the case everywhere. When it comes to your final assignment, you don't need to rewrite the essay topic. We know what it is. You just need to start your assignment on page 1 after your cover sheet.
Elizabeth, I'm just going to go back on something, if that's okay, because there was questions about word count and some comments that were thrown up. But I just want to make a general comment. Sorry for going back on this, but I just want to recommend to everybody that you focus on the content is your primary focus of what you're doing. Don't get hung up about the word count. I said it earlier, if you go over, it's easier to edit back than if you're obsessed with word count as you're writing, because then it will take your focus off what your core purpose is. So I just thought I'd just mention that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Scott. And it's quite obvious when we're reading them too, that those who have just tried so hard to write sentences to make the word count right, you can see the lack of coherence coming through. So you are better to write in a coherent manner, to have it flowing nicely, and then cut back than you are to sort of almost count every word as you go. So it's almost a good idea to summarize it with the word counter off, and then check how many words you summarized it in, and then as Scott says, sort of go backwards from there. What didn't work for you?
Some people are writing that they're getting a bit hung up on the page numbers as well. Where you do actually have issues with that, I'd recommend you contact your just shoot an email, a quick email to your tutor or to your lecturer. But don't get too hung up in relation to formatting, as Elizabeth said previously. Is that whilst it is important, but don't spend too much time if it's about trying to get page number 1 on the first page of the essay. Don't get too hung up about it, because the focus is the quality of your actually the actual written essay. But having said that, it's good to learn how to do those formatting things, because it will carry you through to other lecturers who actually may be a little bit obsessed with formatting. Okay.
And Jessica says, as long as some markers don't deduct marks. Well, Jessica, I'm in charge of moderation, and you may not, I'll just tell you all about this anyway, generally, because you may not know how we deal with assignments. We moderate very closely because, as I said, Scott's in the US, I'm at Hong Kong at present. We've got tutors all over the place, and we have internal tutors and external tutors. We've got people teaching in Sydney, we've got people teaching in Melbourne, we've got a campus in Alice Springs. So we're quite a diverse unit, and so we've already sent out, we've already sent out moderation samples, and we all mark them, we give a grade, we give this comment that we'd make to the student, then we send them all back, and then the internal coordinator and I collate them, and then we put a big graph up to show tutors where they're sitting on the marking schedule. Then we send out a report on how the assignments are to be marked. So, Jessica, your point's a good one, and I've taken note that I'll tell the tutors that we're not fussed about the cover sheet, because the CUC 100 cover sheet seems to sometimes go, I don't know why, on some people's assignments it fits on one page, on others it goes over and creates a second page and the bit goes underneath. And I've tried to do it myself, and I've got the same problem, and so we won't be deducting marks from that. So, as Scott said, don't worry about the little wee things, you know.
I was going to add there, Elizabeth, is that I recommend to my students that they, if they are having difficulties, and is to send it through as a separate document. So I actually will receive a cover sheet. So, because that information is important, you know, your name, your student number, if there's any comments that you wanted to write to me, you know, to inform me about something. So the cover sheet is important. So if the formatting goes skew-whip on you, if there's such a word, when you're trying to attach it as one document, I'd rather you keep it as 2 separate documents. You know, submit the essay or whatever the assignment is, and the cover sheet separately. It's good to learn to know how to do it, but if it is proving a difficulty in a particular assignment, for me, I always say to send in the cover sheet as a separate document. Yeah,
and of course, for the final assignment, you're allowed to make your own cover sheet, and so we give you the generic CDU one, but you can take, it's got a lot of instructions things off it. You can cut bits off it if you like, you know, don't have it, cut it back if you can so it does fit, but you may not be able to because it's a fairly generic one. And Danielle says, what are the comments for on the cover sheet? It might be that you might want to comment, I've had trouble fitting this cover sheet onto one page. I've tried every which way and the section break doesn't work, or something like that. Anything, or some people have got Mac computers and they find that the formatting has changed slightly when, so you might like to say, please note I'm using a Mac, and it was correctly formatted at the time of submission. Things like that. Anything that's worrying you about it, or even my computer broke down this afternoon and I'm half an hour late submitting it, you know, I hope this will be acceptable. The more information you give, not for just, if it's just a normal assignment and nothing's going wrong, you don't really ever have to use the comment. But if you want to, if there is something going wrong, it's a good idea to comment and let your tutor know, because the more information we have, the more we look at your assignment as there's a person at the end of this writing this who is having trouble here. Oh, that's why this is like that. And so we're understanding them. But if we just get something and it seems very spurious, as Scott says, then we're sort of not quite sure why. So, but the main thing is, it's the content of the annotated bibliography. How well you've done the summary, how well you've done the comment, how well you've done the bibliographical details at the top. That's what we're concerned about in this assignment. Yeah. But Scott's quite right that we're just talking about CUC 100 in terms of formatting, in terms of everything we say is specific to this unit. And your own discipline subjects will probably sometimes have different criteria for how they want you to be, how it wants to format, even different referencing systems. So just have to remember to be quite savvy about working out for each subject what are the specific, each unit, which specific requirements are needed for this unit. There's not just one blanket one for the whole of the university. Maybe there should be, but there isn't at this stage. So that's formatting. We won't spend any longer on that because we don't want to get too hung up on that compared to the rest of the time. When we're getting towards the end of the session, we need some questions. So what do you have to do for this assignment? So you type up your bibliographical details, and you're using APA. Now, there's some exceptions here. I know that the Sydney and Melbourne people are 100% business students. Oh, no, Sydney and Melbourne are business students for the internal classes, and so they're using CDU Harvard because that's what business and accounting are doing. If you are one of those students and you think, I can't do two different systems because my discipline's using CDU Harvard, and you put that on your comment sheet and say, I've used CDU Harvard because that's what I'm having to use in the other, and that's the system I've learned, and we'll accept that. We have to teach one generic referencing system so that you get used to how referencing systems work. Up until this year, we taught CDU Harvard, but most of the disciplines now have moved across to APA, and so we were advised we should be teaching APA as the generic one. So we've moved across to using APA. You might note already that in your final essay, we say you can nominate the referencing system you need to use, but we prefer you to learn one generic system and show you can be consistent in a system. So that's why we've chosen APA for this one. So you can't just cut and paste your bibliographical details from the readings that we've given you, core readings, because one might be in Chicago, one may be in Harvard, one might be in APA. And we're asking you to learn to reference by yourself. So you're going to have to look at the APA referencing guide, which is on the CDU library page. It's a very good guide. Look at that and then make sure that you've translated what you've got as the raw bibliographical details as they're appearing at present in the reading, that you've translated it across. And also don't forget that you have to say where you accessed it, which will probably be the CDU. There'll be a www.cdu.edu.epoxy, whatever. That'll probably be where you accessed it from. Because you didn't go out to a library and get the journal and read the journal by hand. You know, you didn't pick it up and read it from cover to cover in paper. You got it from somewhere. So whenever you've got something off the web, you always have to say where it came from. So that's the first thing. Second thing, you do the summary. Danielle, I think the law creates a bit of a problem. You can use your footnoting Australian legal conventions. You can use that in your final assignment, but we'd quite like you to use APA for this one, just so that you learn what a different was. Because if you're doing, say, a double degree, you couldn't use legal referencing in a I was going to say a normal one, not that law is not normal, in a different discipline. So try to use APA in this assignment if you're a law student. It's good for you to just see how a different system works, because the legal referencing system is quite different from any other. And there's bound to be times when you do postgraduate work or whatever, broaden your sphere, and you will need to use a different reference.
That's right, for publication.
Or if you're writing an article for a journal.
Yes,
Scott?
that's right, yes. That's good. I was just about to mention that too.
Yeah. Now, Jessica, you say if you get a reference from the library database, we don't have to put the URL, do we? Yes, you do have to say where you got it from. Yeah. You have to say which database it's from. So you always have to say, when you've got any online journal, you have to say where it came from. Let me just quickly give you the example of one of them. Hang on a minute, I'm just opening something on my computer. Okay, so for instance, Dwyer, when you've looked at Dwyer's a book, and I've got a copy of that book, but you haven't. So we've scanned a copy of the chapter from Dwyer. So you didn't, unlike me, I could just put down that I could just put it in the end of page 22 to 26, because I own the copy, and that's where I got it from. But you don't own a copy of Dwyer. You've got it from the e-readings at CDU. So you would have to put that it was retrieved from http://ereadings.cdu.edu.au view/CDU29, whatever those details are on the CDU site. So don't forget that you have to do that. Hang on, someone's trying to Skype me. I've just turned my Skype off. So if you're having any difficulties with that, don't forget, any time whatsoever you're worried about referencing, you're worried about what do you do. We've got the most brilliant liaison librarians, and we've got one dedicated to CUC 100, and you've also got them dedicated for every other discipline you're in. There's one for nursing, one for law, one for education, and they are so knowledgeable of what they do. So anytime you like, you can phone them, you can email them and say, look, this is what I've done. I think I'll put it into APA. Am I right here? Or this is what I've done. How do I reference this one? Where do I get the URL to say that? Is this correct? And they can help you on those. So, I mean, they won't actually give you the reference. They'll say, they'll go away and look at the referencing sheet and notice your punctuation's not right here. They won't just give you the reference, but they're very, very good at helping you. And they're also excellent at helping when it comes to your final assignment on helping you find extra resources if you're getting stuck on the CDU database. Now, there's another session, another collaborate session with the library next week, same time, Thursday next week, on library researching skills, where they're actually helping you, take you through how to use the databases, and that's such an important session. So if you miss it, make sure you go on and listen to it afterwards. And don't forget, they're there to help you. They love helping students, and they're very user-friendly and lovely people. So make the most of that, not just in this unit, but right through your university career, doing it to help you with researching and referencing.
I also recommend...
Yeah, Scott?
Sorry, Elizabeth, I was going to say to students is that I recommend that you keep a copy of the APA, CDU APA referencing guide with you when you are drafting, because many of your questions that you have about, okay, how do I actually reference, I've just found some information off a website or a journal or whatever, or it details how you are to write up, and many of your queries can be quickly answered by just flicking through the guide.
Now, somebody said, do we need to reference at the end of assignment 2? No, definitely not. The references are your heading, your bibliographic details at the top. So that's all you need. You don't need a reference list at the bottom. So that's the difference between an essay and an annotated bibliography. the details are given, the referencing is given at the top of each annotation, whereas an essay, you start your essay and your references are at the bottom on a separate page. So good question, yeah. So you do your summary, you do your comment, you make sure you formatted it, and then you go and you look at your UI where it says tips for passing assignment 2. It's like a checklist, and you make sure you tick it off. And as I said before, that's the thing where if you ticked every single bit, you probably will pass the assignment, because you'll get marks for some of the generic parts. Even if you turn out not to summarize very well, or your comments a bit askew at one point, you will still probably be okay, because you've got a lot of the core things right just by being conscientious and checking off that you've done everything that's required of you. It's an interesting thing, and I don't think you'd probably agree with me, Scott, that if you're a well-organized student and you methodically follow in every unit the readings that you have to do, the tasks that you're given, you're on time, and you're following the formatting requirements, generally you pass. You'd have to mess it up very badly, yes, really, to, you know, I always think that if you can be well organized as a student, that's half the battle.
Sorry, did you say agree? Yeah, I agree, and also I was going to say we all appreciate that people have got work, family, study balance. So having a study plan is very, very important, and to actually adhering to that study plan. Obviously, a study plan has to be flexible, but as Elizabeth said, it's vital that you cover all the readings, the tasks. It builds up your knowledge base. Opportunities to read beyond the core readings. Look at the bibliographies of the readings that you're looking at if you want to find out more information about, well, where has this author actually got their information from? And it's quite interesting. You may actually enjoy, reading more about a given topic, during a given week.
And actually, Scott's raised a good point there too, that when you're actually researching, if you find an article that on citizenship in the workplace, or citizenship or organizational citizenship behavior or whatever, and you think, I really like this, I like the style of the author, and that's the sort of way I think I'm going to argue, go to his reference list or her reference list, the author's reference list, and follow up on some of their reference details and read further. That could really be your main researching task for that particular skill, because they've already done all the work for you. They've gone and done a whole lot of research, and they've come up with this article that you've read and enjoyed. So as Scott said, follow up and see, okay, so maybe some of these other ones are very relevant to me as well, and you've got a whole database almost created for you. So we've given you some links here to CDU Guide to Annotated Bibliography. I think we've probably just about exhausted that one. There's an ANU Guide one. There's a University UOW. Not sure which one that is, but different links for writing annotated bibliographies. I think you're probably all okay on that really now. It's just a matter of sitting down and having a go at doing it. And of course, just remember too, you learn by your mistakes. You're not going to get it perfect the first time, and most of you are only first-year students, so you're doing incredibly well to have got this far, because it's very hard when you first start off. And we're in week 6 now, and you're all zooming along quite well. So really, you should be patting yourselves on the back and thinking, it's great you've made it this far, and you've only got to stick out another 6 weeks of semester, and then you have your, we don't have exams, but you may have exams. Then you've got some more weeks off, a few weeks off, and then you've only got another 12 weeks. So the end of the first year of uni comes about with only 24 weeks of actual study time, and you're probably going to make it if you've made it through this far. So I think it's great that you've all come along today and joined in, and that in itself shows quite a commitment. So have you got any other questions you want to ask before we, University of Wollongong. Thanks, Scott. I had a mental blank then, yeah. Any other questions that you want to ask? And of course, if you think of any at the end of this and think, blow, I wish I'd asked that, or just ask your tutor, or if you want to, you can email me and I'll answer them straight away for you. So if there's no other questions, no, all good. Well, that's great, and it's been very, very good to deal with you, and I hope that sorted some things out, and I've really enjoyed the interaction with Scott. It's the first time we've worked together on this, and as I said, it was my first time doing a Collaborate session, so it's been great having his help, and it's been very nice, you all typing so I can read what you're saying as I go. So you've given me confidence to do this again, so thank you very much, and I'll see you all in a few weeks when we look at the PowerPoint presentation, and maybe Scott will wake up at 3 a.m. and come and join me again then. Who knows?
Yes,
so
I'll
have a good evening, everybody. Okay. Well, have a good evening, everybody. And Scott, thank you so much. And just remember, ask us anything at any time. And certainly in this unit, no question is a silly question. And if you're having a query about something that's guaranteed, other students are having the same sort of thought. So just ask us and we'll reply as soon as we possibly can. Okay, nice to talk to you all. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.